The most powerful state in the world is taking apart the very alliances and institutions that make it powerful, not by accident, by choice. By the end of this video, I'll show you exactly why, and I'll prove it isn't an accident but a decision. Using a test, you can check yourself. The man making that choice is Donald Trump. But he's only one of three. Trump, Xi, and Putin, three leaders, three completely different strategies for the 21st century. Now, I'm not going to tell you who's winning. That's the hot take version, and it's the wrong question. I'm going to give you a test for who actually changed history versus who just rode forces bigger than himself, and run all three through it honestly. The answers are not the same for the three. That's the whole point. Here's the plan. First, quickly, the test itself. How you separate a leader bending history from a leader riding the wave. Then the three strategists, each run through it, including the strongest case that I'm wrong. And finally, three futures this moment could collapse into, each stated so precisely you could prove it false. Let's begin. Start with the strongest objection to this whole video. There's a tradition, structural realism, that says ignore the personalities. What matters is the raw distribution of power, and any rational leader in the same seat would act the same. If that's true, this video is a waste of your time. So I won't assert that leaders matter. I'll try to prove it. Here's the stage they're standing on. By the end of 2025, there were three powers heavy enough to anchor the system. The United States, China, and Russia, none able to dictate terms, all able to shape them. And three power systems have a signature instability, the permanent temptation for two of them to gang up on the third. The defining question of our moment is exactly that. Can the US pull Russia away from China, or has its own behavior welded them together? Power doesn't become policy directly, it gets filtered, and I use the same three filters on all three leaders so the comparison is fair. 1. Perception, how the leader personally reads the trends and the clock. 2. Extraction capacity, how much of the nation's raw power the state can actually convert into money, weapons, technology. 3. Institutional constraint, the treaties, legislatures, and alliances that bind the leader's hands. Structure sets the menu. These three choose from it. The choice is what we observe. And this is the move that turns opinion into method. For each leader, I run a counterfactual. I ask what a purely structural account predicts the state should do, call it X, and what the leader-centric account predicts, Y. When the menu allows only one rational option, structure wins and agency is trivial. But when the menu is wide and the leader picks the option that runs against structural logic, that's agency doing real visible causal work. I pair this with one role conception each, declared upfront so it can be proven wrong. Trump as the indispensable dealmaker. America as a creditor demanding payment for protection it once gave free. Xi as the civilisational restorer. China as architect of a post-Western order. Putin as the besieged-fortress revisionist. Russia reclaiming a sphere by force. Now let's test them, and the verdicts won't match. Donald Trump, and the puzzle I opened with. Structurally, America still holds the deepest financial, technological, and alliance assets on Earth. A status quo strategy of simply maintaining the order it built was fully available. He didn't take it. On this reading, Trump perceives American primacy not as something to defend, but as something that's been exploited by free riders. The same structural facts read upside down. The role he performs is the creditor nation. Subsidize the allies, absorb the deficits, now demands to be paid. And the evidence fits at every turn. Across 2025, tariffs went from a tool of last resort to the default instrument. Leverage, revenue, punishment across more than 70 countries. The China track ran 9 months of escalating tariffs to the October 2025 Busan truce, where analysts read, Beijing revealed its rare earth leverage and Washington its determination to deny advanced chips. In December, allowing Nvidia's H200 sales to China turned a strategic red line into a bargaining chip. Allied defense spending rose, but the unpredictability left allies hedging against Washington itself. Every marker of a transactional strategy is present. The markers of institution building are absent. Now the test, the payoff I promised. A structural account says a hegemon facing rising challenges should tighten alliances and defend the institutions that multiply its power. Outcome X, available to any president. The leader-centric account predicts outcome Y, discounting those alliances for bilateral extraction. The evidence favors Y, and therefore agency, because the menu plainly contained X. The assets for it were intact. The rival alignment argued for it, and the chosen policy ran the other way. The result: allies hedging against Washington, and the Sino-Russian alignment he wanted to break growing deeper. A structure-only model cannot explain a hegemon eroding its own advantages. That's the proof I promised. Not an accident, a choice. Verdict: agency dominant. Xi Jinping. Structurally, China has risen to near parity in output and peer status in several domains, a menu running from near-term military adventurism to slow institutional displacement. On this reading, Xi sees American decline as real but reversible if provoked, and time as his ally. And economic strain at home makes low-cost strategies attractive, so he chooses patience. The role he performs is the civilisational restorer, not war but institution building, global South patronage, and a posture of patient inevitability over Taiwan. The evidence is concrete. At the Tianjin Summit of September 2025, the largest in the history of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, more than 20 heads of state, Xi unveiled a global governance initiative articulating an equal and orderly multipolar world. The Global South agenda is material. Visa exemptions for 48 countries, 23 free trade agreements. On Taiwan, the Justice Mission 2025 exercise in late December, 89 aircraft sorties on day 1 rising to 130 over 48 hours, with blockade simulations Type A called unprecedented. But the framing was reunification as unstoppable yet unhurried, an access denial shield freezing the status quo, not a countdown to invasion. His headline priority was the next 5-year plan. And here the test gives a different verdict, which is exactly why the method earns trust. Structurally, a rising power closing the gap should translate capability into accelerating coercion over Taiwan, outcome X. The leader-centric account predicts outcome Y, deliberate below threshold patience. The evidence favors Y but only partially. The structural pressure toward assertiveness is visible in the sheer scale of those exercises. The choice to wrap them in a rhetoric of inevitability and foreground the 5-year plan reflects perception and economic strain that structure alone wouldn't predict. So Xi's agency runs on a tighter leash than Trump's. The honest verdict isn't agency dominant, it's structure plus agency. Vladimir Putin. Structurally, Russia is the weakest of the three by economy, but the strongest in nuclear capability and demonstrated risk tolerance. The binding variable, the one doing the work, is extraction. Russia's ability to keep converting a straining economy into war. On this reading, Putin reads time as Russia's ally and Western resolve as brittle. The role he performs is the besieged fortress, sustained war, negotiation used as stalling, and global South outreach against hegemonism. The evidence shows endurance under real strain. Russia's National Welfare Fund, its liquid reserves, has fallen 59% since early 2022 to around $48 billion by mid-2025. That figure is realized. Sanctions have degraded the energy sector towards systemic risk, yet the war continues. Negotiation is used to stall and divide the Western alliance. After a December 2025 meeting on a peace plan, Moscow alleged a Ukrainian drone strike on Putin's residence and hardened its terms. An attack US intelligence assessed never happened. I'll mark the limits honestly. That the attack didn't occur is established. That Putin personally engineered the lie as strategy is suggestive, not proven. And the projected figures: grain exports of 53 to 55 million tons sustaining global South influence, are forecasts, not outturns, and I'm flagging them on screen as such. The test: a power suffering a more than 50% reserve drawdown, technological strangulation, and mounting costs should, structurally, move toward a settlement to cut its losses. That's X, the cost-minimizing path. The leader-centric account predicts Y, continued war and deliberate stalling, despite those costs. The evidence favors Y, and therefore agency, because the documented pattern is exactly that. Stalling amid quantified economic deterioration, structural pressure overridden over a sustained period. A structure-only model predicts de-escalation. Only Putin's perception that time favors him and the absence of anyone able to veto him explain the persistence. Verdict: agency dominant. Side by side. Trump coerces with market centrality, Xi attracts and deters with supply chain centrality, Putin endures on energy and food. Trump thinks in deals, Putin in the war's duration, Xi in decades. When two of three poles think in years and one in quarters, advantage accrues to the patient. And the three interact. The claim is they corrode the order faster than any could alone, by mutual enabling. Trump's retrenchment removes the countervailing pressure against both rivals. Xi's order building absorbs the states America sets adrift. Putin's war consumes the European attention that might resist either. But I'll hold that to its evidence. If the effect were real, Sino-Russian convergence should accelerate. In trade it didn't. Bilateral trade actually fell about 7% in 2025. So the interaction thesis survives in its qualitative coordination form, and I report the trade plateau as a genuine point against the strong version rather than hiding it. Now the strongest objection to my entire framing. Maybe the system isn't tripolar at all. Maybe it's bipolar. Only the US and China are full spectrum, and Russia is a regional power punching above its weight on one war and one arsenal. By GDP and technology, Russia isn't in China's class, and its dependence on Chinese components points to a hierarchy, not a triad. I concede the asymmetry completely. My answer is to qualify, not dismiss. The test for a pole isn't uniform capability. It's whether a power can decisively affect the central balance and must be courted by the others. Russia meets that narrower test, and crucially the claim is falsifiable and dated. Russia stops being a pole the moment its alignment stops being something the others can influence. One timestamp in fairness to you. The paper was written in early 2026 when that 90% complete Ukraine deal was a live negotiating claim. As of June 2026, it has not closed. Talks stalled through the spring and strikes continued, which, if anything, strengthens the reading of Putin as stalling rather than settling. A sharper version says, a power whose war reportedly can't continue without another pole's components isn't a pole at all. It's a junior partner, and counting it double counts Chinese power. The resolution is to separate present capability, present autonomy, and systemic function. Russia's autonomy is eroding, but polehood is functional status, not autonomy. A pole is a power the others must court, and both Washington and Beijing still court Moscow. So the honest formulation is tripolar in function, asymmetric in autonomy, trending toward a Sino-American bipolarity with Russia as China's dependent, real now, probably transitional. And for everyone who isn't one of the three, contested tripolarity hands a hedging premium to states that can play the poles off each other. India refused US tariff pressure over Russian oil and was courted by Beijing. Pakistan faces the more delicate version of the same calculus. One disclosure, on screen. I write from Pakistan and treat middle power autonomy as a value as well as a variable. The pre-specified test exists to discipline exactly that. One last counterfactual, for the system as a whole. Would a structure-only model predict the world we see? The configuration, yes, three poles, the two against one temptation. Even the broad Sino-Russian alignment are overdetermined. They'd emerge under almost any leadership, and honesty means conceding that. But the character is another matter. Structure cannot easily explain the defining feature of this moment, that the strongest pole would voluntarily discount the alliances and institutions that are its advantage. Realism expects a hegemon to defend its primacy. The United States did the opposite. Structure set the stage. The leaders determined how fast and in which direction the order would erode. So which way does it break? Three futures, each stated so you could prove it false, on a horizon to the end of 2027. 1. A managed concert, a durable Ukraine armistice holding past a year, arms control talks resuming, binding Trump-C symmetry, falsified the moment two poles clash. 2. Bipolar hardening, Russia's dependence deepening, its autonomy falling, the global south consolidating around Beijing. Falsified if Russia diversifies away or a US-Russia rapprochement detaches Moscow. 3. Fracture. A Taiwan blockade, a NATO-Russia engagement, nuclear signaling after the February 2026 treaty lapse, falsified by their sustained absence. The strategists have returned to the center of history. Structure built the stage, but three individuals, inside three very different sets of material limits, are deciding how the play ends. The discipline's job isn't to predict the ending, it's to specify, in advance and falsifiably, what each ending would require. That's what this analysis has tried to do. I'm Naim Tahir Baig. Thank you for thinking it through with me.